Gentrification. Even though this term slowly starts to be popular in the mainstream media, it is still not well understood among the public. And that is fine. What we find worrying is how people promptly jump to take a side and judge whether gentrification is good or bad for the city. Since gentrification resembles a phenomenon, we often perceive it as an abstract subject, and therefore it is always a bit confusing. With the purpose of making this phenomena a bit more tangible for the public, in this episode we will try to illustrate it with a sketch. With that being said, we will also make an attempt to give some points that can help us to detect and avoid gentrification. Stay tuned. The first one: ignore, improve, gentrify. One major urban pattern that allows gentrification to appear is continuous disregard of a given urban space. In other words, poor maintenance of whole neighborhoods to a point of desperation, where in the end a single developer is being offered as an ultimate solution. To illustrate this better, we have made the following sketch. We have started by sketching a regular everyday urban fabric. As you can see on the drawing, we have interrupted the standard city structure by a giant hole. This rectangular crater is a figurative analogy of a long period of ignorance. We have purposely sketched this crater in a regular form to emphasize its artificial creation that has appeared as a result of a human hidden intention called ignorance. Now that we have clearly depicted the surface of the rectangular crater, we can distinguish that this imagined city has two different elevations. One is the street level and the second one is at the bottom of the crater. Logically, the space at the bottom of the crater has degraded urban qualities. It is out of reach of sunlight, there is poor air ventilation, and it's quite inaccessible. Consequently, we can logically assume that the urban space found in the crater has lower real estate value. Therefore, this crater, which in our sketch resembles personification of ignorance, is not a space where one would like to live. However, the low real estate value can be attractive for low-income families, but also for profit-hungry investors. Investors who can now acquire this degraded building lot for cheap money and flip it into something, let's say, more interesting. And as you can see on the illustration, inside the hole we have sketched a building that is way fancier than the surrounding urban fabric. The fact that the investors have saved on the property purchase, they can input more financial means into making the new development in the bottom of the crater attractive, accessible, visible, and even desirable. Now this place is a place where one would love to be. A place that resembles a final destination to all the routes. This is why we have symbolically sketched a flag on top of the new development and streets that lead you straight to the new building. Of course, even though these kind of 90 degrees inclined streets are physically impossible, they reflect the power that an investor can have in order to make the development as a center of the area. The bottom of this crater is now improved, but the low-income families cannot look for the refuge there anymore. No, this newly developed space now operates mainly as a business plan for revenue return. This, our dear friends, is a simplified version of how the most common process of gentrification works. Buckle your seatbelts, there is more coming.
Second case, gentrification language. Gentrification often comes in a form of an exclusive language that is understandable to a specific group of people. To demonstrate this in a better way, we have made this sketch. As you can see on the drawing, we have illustrated a single building that is metaphorically placed under a glass dome, or also known as cloche décor. Cloche décor is actually a glass object that is meant to offer visibility and protection to a distinctive item that is predominantly important, delicate, and not intended for touching. Therefore, our initial idea for explaining architecture as an exclusive language that causes gentrification was to draw a building that is protected by this kind of protective dome. Why? Well, simply speaking, a glass dome reflects distinction and barrier. In analogy to this, if one building stands out from the surrounding context and it is built by materials that take special effort for construction and maintenance, it immediately suggests that it is delicate and expensive. This suggestion actually operates as a barrier for those who cannot afford to repair expensive items. In other words, it resembles a hidden shield against people with low income. On the contrary, this secret design language that implies that something has been carefully manufactured and it can cost a lot of money resonates with people who are actually have this kind of objects in their pockets, on their kitchen counters, or on top of their nicely polished marble fireplaces. Therefore, if we take a closer look in the sketch, you will notice that we have also sketched some of the people placed under a glass dome. These are actually the wealthy people who can recognize the delicate architectural design language, and therefore they feel more liberated to use this kind of special architecture. On the other side, less financially situated recognize this architecture as something that is only meant for richer people, as a precious, fragile piece of craft that if it breaks might be brutal for their pockets. This exclusive language is often a starting point for gentrification. And this is not all. Let's move forward with the next explanatory sketch.
Subtle gentrification. Affordability is often in the focus of the large urban developments. But under the mantle of affordability, there could be different negative aspects hiding. One of those aspects is the risks of subtle gentrification. With the intention of elaborating this type of gentrification, we have illustrated the following sketch story. In our sketchbook, we have imagined a hypothetical urban space that is surrounded by an eroding cliff. This hypothetical space is definitely not functionally attractive since it is absolutely not accessible. However, this space is ideal for developers who would like to flip it into an urban location with isolated qualities such as hotel with nice private park, restaurant with lake, or maybe apartments with nice views over the authentic nature. And as you can see, that is why in the middle of this little isolated cliff we have sketched a nice attractive building as a symbol of attractive architecture. Now, in order to make this imagined development a bit more realistic, we also have to add some bridges that will offer access to the desirable place. Well, as you can notice, we have sketched a couple of bridges, but you can also notice that they are slightly different. Why they are different? Well, for the purposes of this point, let's presume that on the right side of the illustration we have sketched houses of people with stable income, and on the left side we have illustrated a neighborhood with low-income families. This is an imagined city condition that is not far from the real urban context. Can you actually see that the bridges that are directed towards the high-income houses are big, wide, stable, and nicely done, while the bridges that are oriented towards the low-income neighborhood are a little bit twisted, shaky, and insecure? Well, these bridges are a simple representation of how subtle gentrification works. Subtle gentrification is often hidden behind poorly understood affordability. In other words, even if one new development is accessible and affordable for usage, the people who have better credit files, decent insurance policies, and up-to-date personal documentation are those who can more promptly occupy and acquire these newly designed affordable spaces. These bridges that we have sketched here are actually a personification of the different socio-economical hardware and software that is given to different groups of people prior to purchasing or exploiting a new urban space.
Case 4. Eco-gentrification. In order to explain eco-gentrification, we have made the following illustration. As you can see in the major focus, we have sketched a green building that is placed in the middle of a dense urban environment. This imagined urban environment is so dense that, as we can see here, there is no place for green spaces, there are no wide streets, which indicates poor air quality and low living standards. Obviously, from these buildings, we can get the impression that this envisioned urban tissue arises incrementally in a vernacular manner without too much planning. Well, these conditions are optimal for governments to make partnership with private developers and initiate new development in the name of ecology, sustainability, and urban density. And that is exactly what is happening in our little concept sketch. The green building in the middle, which obviously should remind us of the green future, is being placed as a dominant entity in this vulnerable neighborhood. On top of the building, you can see plenty of solar panels, wind turbines, which also suggest that the building has an excellent water recuperation system and energy-efficient installation. But now is the time to point out the elephant in the room. It's quite striking that we have sketched how people are being squeezed out from this green building, like spaghetti or grinded meat coming out of a grinding machine. Bit confusing, right? But now if you take a closer look at the top of the green building, among the eco-equipment, you can also see an object that looks like a grinding handle. Is this eco-building one big grinding machine for people? If so, then how does this machine operate? Yes, the excellent ecological performances of this building, decorated with nice pocket parks, urban equipment for bikes, low energy bills, within an environment with relatively low real estate price, is super attractive for middle income people. These are people who are not wealthy, but have a great credit file with reliable social status. For these sort of people, the open socio-economic doors are sufficient enough in order to acquire higher living standards. These people are actually the target of the ecological developments, and they are the first one to resonate with it. Therefore, they are in a prime position for purchasing this kind of environmentally friendly living unit. But in this process, they are in fact paving the path for more ecological developments and potentially squeezing more locals out of their homes. These buildings, which are great for the environment, are often operating as a massive grinding machine for pushing low-income families and vulnerable social groups further away from their homes and centers of the city.
Long-term gentrification, case number 5. Gentrification also occurs in the long time spans that are often not comprehensive for humans. To illustrate this phenomenon, we have sketched the following concept. As you can see, we have briefly sketched a construction site. More precisely, we've sketched an escalated hall where in the middle there is foundational concrete slab of some upcoming development. On top of the concrete slab, we see some fixtures and technical appliances, but also we can see some untamed nature. Directly speaking, we have illustrated a tree that grows on top of the building's foundations, bushes popping out of the concrete, and severe erosion of the soil. These conceptual entities indicate that this construction site is being here for a long period of time. It actually looks like a little bit forgotten. Well, is this construction site forgotten? Maybe forgotten by the public, but not by the investor. To answer this question, we have added a curtain that intends to cover the construction site. Well, as you can see, the irony is that this curtain is in fact transparent. This see-through curtain is a metaphor of the time and its oblivious power that is often used by big-sized corporations. In other words, big corporations last way longer than the average human life, and by playing game of prolongation and procrastination, they can execute different developments that may have not been well accepted and received by the public. In addition to this construction site that is sketched with curtains on associates to some sort of a show, theater or backstage. Something that is meant to be seen by the public, but the preparation of it remains secretive. In other words, whenever we see some construction site that lasts long, we understand that something is not right, but we surely don't understand all the business deals that are happening behind the scenes. Business deals that, if you know how to wire them well to the continuous inflation rates with a company that is well supplied, with the most important resource called time, can be turned into pure accumulated wealth. These kind of slow developments are a great tool for gentrification, which is quite immune against any public resistance.
We hope that you can extract a lot of knowledge from these sketches, and we definitely have to prepare more episodes on proposing solutions that can prevent gentrification from happening. But the first thing that we want you to remember is the following. Gentrification is often a consequence, a reaction that follows after an improper treatment of the city as a whole. Gentrification appears as a sole savior, conducted by a pragmatic central source of power, but it can be avoided if there are well-established systems for continuous and deliberate maintenance of the urban fabric. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and see you next time. Have a nice gentrification day.